Welcome to Creative Spaces Podcast with Guy Zwick, Chief Creative Officer of Highway 85 Creative. In each episode, we will discuss creative ways to define your space and build your brand.
Welcome to one of the first episodes of the Studio 85 Copper State Lounge, where we showcase and discuss and chat with some great people local to Arizona. And today, our very, very famous guest, who sat right across from me and right next to Guy's legs, is...
Hi, kids. My name is Evo Terra. Thanks for having me on here, guys. Thanks.
Thank you for coming. Evo Terra.
That's me, Evo Terra.
Can't forget that. Guys looks kind of a cool name, too, but Evo Terra?
No. Hey, three-letter names win. We got Joe, we got Guy, we got Evo, and we got Scope.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I can't say T's either. Sco's or Scott. SKA, my nickname. So I'm just going to jump into this. Evo, you and Joe met recently.
We did.
At some kind of a function. Tell me where you guys met and what you were doing there, and how the heck are you here today?
Yeah, so Joe and I met at an interesting little event. I don't know if you know this or not, but Arizona is a hotbed of a new industry called cannabis. Wow. Huge cannabis industry taking place right here in Arizona. We're already a medical marijuana state. We're soon to be a recreational marijuana.
Did not know that.
Yeah, coming up in 2020, the vote will come up again. But huge amount of money, huge amount of business. Right. And Joe and I it was both of our first ever entrances into a networking event for Arizona-based cannabis business owners.
Right.
And that's how we first ran into each other. He had just heard about it a couple of hours ago, and a very good friend of mine, when I came back into the country, said, "You must come to this event on whatever day it was." And Joe and I met real early.
You hear that? He said hotbed. Hotbed. Yeah, remember that next time you're asking why I'm focusing on that. He used the word hotbed.
Yes, it is a hotbed.
Well said.
Cash rich, literally, as in they can't deposit in a bank.
Yes.
Do you know much about
cannabis?
Uh-huh.
Not a ton, but we have a number of clients in that industry, and have done some trade shows for some, and some retail stores, and no, they're not stores. What do you call them?
Dispensaries.
Dispensaries.
When someone says cannabis, that's marijuana plus byproducts, right?
That is everything that's based from marijuana, from the dispensaries to the vape pens to the edible lines to the delivery vehicles, everything that's involved in either the cultivation or production and distribution of said plant.
Sounds like it's a nice topic for another in-depth episode, but I'm just going to kind of keep moving forward. So Joe invited you to the show with a little bit of a preamble, and you have a lot to talk about, and we have a lot we could ask you about, but for the purposes of this conversation today, podcasting and best practices. But before we get into that, can you just give us a little bit more about who you are, where you're from? You mentioned Thailand. You're in the States now.
Yeah.
There's probably a little bit of difference between, say, Phuket and Arizona.
Yeah, Phuket and Peoria.
Yeah. Well, there you go. It's even better. The alliteration. I missed that. He's a pro.
Very different. So short version of me, I have been doing what eventually became a podcast since 2002.
Okay.
I got involved with something online radio, which morphed into terrestrial radio, as well as satellite syndication. We were on XM satellite for a while, and actually a stint on KFYI, the Valley's talk station, for about a year and a half. And during that time, podcasting was the cool thing that was happening. Back in 2004 was when that happened. In 2005, I was asked to author Podcasting for Dummies, first book that came out in that series. I've since gone on to write 2 other books that are in the For Dummies series, a second edition, as well as Expert Podcasting Practices for Dummies, which is arguably the worst title of a book on the planet. So that's how I kind of got into the industry, and since then I have been deeply involved in podcasting, from keynoting various events around the country, or around the world actually. While I was in Thailand, you mentioned, where my wife and I spent the last 3 years of our lives, I started a podcast strategic consulting company, and I help clients, most of which who are professional service providers, figure out what it means for them to have a podcast and how they can go about podcasting better that incorporates it into their business, as opposed to 3 dudes hanging around saying, "Let's build a studio for fun," which is awesome, guys. I'm so glad that you did this. This is fantastic.
He was looking directly at Guy when he said that. Just so you guys would know.
Most of these people are discovering it's like, oh my gosh, this podcasting thing, which has been around for 15 years, is suddenly huge, and I need someone to show me how to do it because I don't have time to learn the guts, all the behind the scenes thing. I just want to sit behind the microphone and talk. Could you help me do that? And could you help me figure out what I should talk about as well? So that's what I do for my clients literally around the world.
When you say, well answered, when you say service providers, are you talking telephone companies or?
No. Professional service providers.
Okay,
so most of my, I've got attorneys, I have financial advisors, I have some medical professionals. So these are people who, for the most part, are their own individual consultant. They're independent contractors. They've got a small firm. And that's how they're getting out to the world with their message of what their firm does, not necessarily to go find new clients, but kind of to showcase their skill set. It's like it's a business card. It's like in 2000, remember in the year 2000, every business realized that no one read the yellow pages anymore and suddenly had to get their business online because that's where the business went. 2008, every business looks around and says, all of my employees are farting around on Facebook all day. These people have found new time in their day to consume media. We need to be a part of that conversation. Well, here we are 10 years later. And now with the prevalence of smartphones everywhere and with Alexa devices and connected cars, we're always connected now and are looking for audio entertainment that's not what we get on the radio.
Okay, and then, are you helping them distribute it too?
Yeah, I do. I do the whole business launch. This is from concept all the way out. Yeah, sometimes I will actually go out and source the content as well, find hosts, find the entertainment, find the talent for the show. Sometimes I do that, or sometimes it's we just do a lot of coaching and work with them to make sure that they're producing things properly or they're recording stuff properly. Then they give it all to me for the back end process so that everything works. So it's distributed around the world or as wide as it could possibly be.
So help me understand some of your clients that come to you.
Sure.
So they're like, well, there's this thing called podcasting, and I found it's a great way to organically talk about what I'm all about. Right? It's great content for me. Yeah. Is that their mindset when they come to you? I have some things to say, and I want to do some people confuse podcasting with just audio files on a blog. But if they come to you, they know enough about podcasting as a possible bullet in their six shooter for their marketing armor.
I love it when that happens, but oftentimes I've got a client right now that's actually an agency that works with a B2B client, and their client said to them, "We need a podcast," and the agency said, "The hell's a podcast?" And someone referred them to me, so I'm basically shepherding them through the entire process because the client also says, "All we know is we want a podcast. We don't know what that means.
Yeah, we don't
but
know
we
why.
want a podcast."
Okay, that's fine.
So,
and what do you think? So here's the thing: when that happens, I want a podcast. What do you think that comes from? Just someone just listen to podcasts when they're running and said we should have one for our company? Like, what do you think?
I think if you track the news cycle of what's happening in the world where podcasting announcement has been made, go to Google Trends and just search on the word podcasting and zoom into the last 2 years. It's off the charts. The attention that podcasting is getting now from the media, not necessarily from downloads, although we are adding a ton of new people listening all of a sudden as well. So we're seeing more attention from the media and from the people. The people never went away. It's just the media went away for a few years and have now rediscovered this as a very cool thing that's worth talking about. So they're talking about it, and that gets stuck in people's heads.
It's amazing. I mean, I've been consuming one particular Joe Rogan podcast for the last 3 days driving to and from work.
You bet. Yeah.
And where else can you do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Podcasting allows you to.
Well, so we're talking to the right guy.
Yeah.
But just something just clicked in my head. When did we start Creative Spaces? I know about when, but what was the origination of that?
That's what I wanted to ask him. If I came to you, like when we decided we were what you just described. We wanted a podcast.
Yeah, right.
Didn't know exactly what it was.
Sure.
Why? What? Just knew we had some other influences that said we wanted to try this and see what we could do with it. If we came to you at that point, what are the steps you get to say, okay, well, it's one thing to say you want it, but you don't seem to know what you want. How do you get us just that baby step forward? Where do you start? Where do you start in the process?
Sure. So I have for the last 20 years been a digital strategist. So whether that's marketing, whether that's content, this is what I do. And it started out, well, I want a website. Well, do you have any idea what that actually means? Nope, just know I want one. Okay, great. It's not much different than that process. Okay. It is a process of discovery. It's like, okay, you want things. One of the first things I do is I try and set some expectations. Do you have X number of dollars to spend? What is your budget? Either way that question gets asked. I need to find out how much, because if they say, we're thinking about doing something for $100 a month, well, then good luck doing it all on your own. But if, in fact, they say, well, we think this is a big deal for us and we're willing to carve out some of our marketing dollars, okay, then we can have a conversation about what needs to take place. But it always starts off with a good level setting. What do you want? What do you listen to? You, right now, Guy, listen to the Joe Rogan podcast. Straight through, right?
Yes.
Okay, that is a certain style of podcast,
Yep.
right? This is an ex-radio guy who's taken to the exact same thing, grab a microphone, put it in front of them, and no clock, no show clock. Awesome, I'll talk for 2.5 hours, right? Which is what those guys will do. You also have the dual shows, the standard format that I like to call Two Dorks with Microphones, which I was
that us?
really good
He's
at.
looking at you and Joe.
Yes, that's definitely us.
Yeah, yeah.
But hold on, there's only one person here who's wearing lobsters on his shorts, so I think that's self-explanatory. Yeah.
But then there's also a whole, that's the easy stuff. That's doing interview-based, let's talk in front of the microphone. Either the interview or a monologue and let's do it. But we have these entire huge journalistic style, these deep storytelling where they'll go cut tape for days and come back to the studio and spend hours splicing things together.
And knitting it, yeah.
Yeah, that's
This American
new.
Life type piece.
Yeah, exactly,
Beautiful.
right. Where they spend, literally 60 to 80 hours for every 10-minute piece of audio that comes out.
Yeah.
Right. Is that what you're looking for, client? These are all the things I have to figure out. Where do you want to go? How deep do you want to get in this?
Great answer. Isn't the first question almost, well, why do you want to have one? And that helps inform the next series of questions you might ask them, right?
Well, I definitely think I get to that question. I don't know that I ask it overtly because they know they want one, and so it becomes my job to make them realize that there is a good path that's specific for them, that they don't have to get out. Now to answer your question, Scott, one of the first things I want to know about is who's the audience.
Right.
So it's less why do you want to, but more importantly, who are you trying to talk to? Especially for my clients who are professional service providers.
Right.
Are you talking to potential clients, or are you talking to your peer group? I've got a couple of financial planners who have great stuff. They don't talk to people like you and me who have money to invest. They talk to other financial planners.
Right.
They've got their business model is different than going to the public. They want to go to other financial planners. So who are we talking to? Talked to a gentleman last week who might become a client. He sells land in one of the corners of one of the Carolinas, north or south. I forget which one it happens to be. And he talks to people who have land for sale who don't know what the value is, and his other audience is a group of real estate agents who maybe should get into the land selling business, which is very different than a house selling business. So it's all different. But it hinges on who is that audience out there. We'll back in to figure out what your show should be like once we understand that.
And so so in your business then, great answer by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Different clients have different needs. Some are completely turnkey. Some are help me just figure out what the content is, the calendar piece of it is. Some might just need help me on the production side of things.
Right.
Do most of your ultimate, company clients, do they get that this is a content play? That they get that this is a subject matter expertise play. If I could sort of talk about things that my prospective customer might want to hear, it puts me in a good spot. Yes?
Yeah. Anybody who comes in saying, my business wants a podcast and we're going to sell sponsorship,
okay,
I turn them away quickly.
Really?
Because that's not the model that's going to work. If you're talking about your plumbing business, you're not going to get a worthwhile sponsor for your plumbing business. That's not a good model. Don't try and plug advertising into it. Podcasting is definitely a long form game.
Yeah.
If you're expecting to have success this week, it won't. I have been getting into a lot of pilot episodes. I've got 2 clients right now where I'm developing 3-episode proof of concept pilots for them. So it'll literally just be 3 episodes, fixed cost, X price. Let's just do it. Let's put 3 episodes out there and find out, do you like this? Do the people in your organization like this? Is this who you really want to be? And are you willing to put this much energy and effort and money into doing this on a regular basis?
Did you come up with that yourself?
Is that what you should do?
That's a really cool idea. So
it's
people
a really
can
cool idea.
invest a little bit without putting the whole kitchen sink in there.
Exactly.
And let the rest of the folks taste it.
Exactly.
And if they like it and they're on board, now you can properly move forward.
Right. And we try and do everything the right way inside of that pilot episode so that there is a real understanding that, yes, this is something we can be proud of and we're willing to continue to invest in this direction. Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I might assume, maybe it's assumption, I'd like to know, but do you find that there's a lot of people that this being behind the scenes, not doing a video is a better medium for them in the voice space than doing the video? Or how many of these do you get people to say, hey, you've got a good energy, there's something good about you, and you turn the podcast into a video? Because there's that blurred line.
Right.
A lot of people hear podcasts and then they still go watch the podcast on YouTube. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I hear
that. There's that genre of things too. The others who you'd never want to be on camera because you're not the same on camera. You know, you have more experience than we do in that, so be curious to know, your thoughts on that.
I remember when video invaded the podcasting space in around the 2008 timeframe. A lot of the audio podcasters decided to try out video. Video cameras getting a whole lot less expensive. You could actually buy switching equipment and other cool things for production that lowered the barrier of entry technologically to do that. And we had YouTube. And also, with a podcast, you can literally put any media file down the feed. Heck, you could podcast Word documents if you wanted to. They'll go. They've made it whether or not somebody can read them or not is a different thing.
Right.
So I watched this happen, and in most cases that I am aware of, the person behind the microphone should have stayed behind the microphone and never bothered to bring a camera into the conversation because it's just two talking heads. You don't need to watch that.
No. And then let's face it, there's people do have radio faces. I mean, unless the genesis of the idea is he's attractive or she's quite cute in that bikini. I know it sounds sexist, but sometimes it's good to have that medium. But in general, it's a good question, Guy, because the lines have been blurred. It's almost like technology allows you to do more and more stuff, but at some point it goes full circle, and it's like, okay, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, Jurassic Park logic would play really well.
This last one might be good, though, right? I didn't mind not the one that just came out, the one before that.
Yeah.
Isn't this new one, though, like basically just Jurassic Park 3, but redone?
Maybe. That's probably why
the dinosaurs escape the park and take over the world. I mean, isn't that what Jurassic Park 3 was?
I don't know. We'd have to ask Max, my son, because
he would know that.
He would know that.
So, Joe, I'm going to go quick to you. The general topic of today's conversation was podcasting best practices, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and you've had great answers so far.
Thanks.
And I do want to ask you some more questions about you and your practice. But let's say a company comes to you and says, "I want a podcast," and they're they're a chiropractor. They're an association of chiropractors.
Sure. Right.
Maybe they have 8 or 9 offices in the valley. They said to you, "We heard that we can get our points across. We can evangelize what we're all about and give people a bit more context about what we are." And they go to you and say, "We know nothing about it. We have $3,000 to spend for a year." What should they do? What are the steps they have to take to go from not having one to producing one?
Yeah, right. So realistically, there's only about 4 steps. There are 4 big steps, but 4 steps to really launching a podcast. And step number 1 is obviously produce some content. Now, there's a lot wrapped up in that, right? And my clients, I spend a lot of time talking about format. Because clients think, I want a podcast, and they know enough to know they want an interview style or they want a single host that's doing a monologue file, but they aren't thinking about how all of that gets created. What are the actual connective tissues and pieces? What are the models and templates they can use for what a show format ought to be? So I help them. That's one of the first things we do is we understand what the format of the show is going to be, and then how does that slice and dice up? Is there an intro that's canned every single week? Are you welcoming a guest off camera or off air or on air with them? Right. How do you do a wrap-up show? All of those sorts of things. Associated with that is making the non-audio pieces that no one thinks about. Well, I shouldn't say no one. Very few people think about. Are we describing this content properly, to make the right title and subtitle?
Right.
What about a description that works well on a phone as opposed to what goes onto the website? And how do we link the website and the phone and the media? All of these things happen.
Almost like you used to be a digital marketer at some point.
Yeah, some of this. Yeah, so the first part is just understanding all of the pieces and then assembling something that sounds good.
Right.
Yesterday, I sent over one initial episode to a client so she could take it to her boss, the CEO, and say, do you like what we're doing? It was nothing but audio. We just gave her the audio files, put on her phone, hand it to her boss, and say, you just listen to this as a proof of concept. Now, after that, we have to add in all those other little pieces that are necessary to make the show. But that's number one. Assemble your content. Number two, best practice here is secure, solid podcast media hosting. You guys using Libsyn, Joe?
Right.
Yeah. Right. So Libsyn is by far the biggest and the best as far as I'm concerned. I'm not paid by them. I've been a Libsyn customer since 2004. I know the guys that run it. They're awesome people. If you're going to host a podcast, you need to use a service like Libsyn. So why not use Libsyn? It's a great service because not only will they make sure that your media files are always available, but they are responsible for your RSS feed, which is the lifeblood of a show, and the other connections to other places. These guys are better at that than you. Trust me, they are great at making sure the feed is always up to speed and up to snuff. So use a company like Libsyn, but make sure you're using it properly. A lot of clients that I get to do a lot of cleanup work, and there's lots of fields that they didn't know what they were, and so they just ignored them. Because as much as I love Libsyn, their user interfaces was a gorilla made it, and
it's pretty archaic.
Oh my God, it's just the worst thing. So I spent a lot of time fixing that for clients. So all right, so you get your media files assembled, you host them up on Libsyn somewhere. Right. The second and the third thing, the most important thing, is submit your podcast.
Right.
It's got to go to Apple Podcasts, or you might call it iTunes, but it's Apple Podcast. It's got to go to Spotify. It's got to go to Stitcher. It's got to go to Spreaker. It's got to go to TuneIn. It's got to go to Radio Public. All these different places that a show has to go. So you get somewhere in there have 90% coverage of all the places someone might go to listen to a file. And now you got to make it ready for Google. Google has finally announced they're supporting podcasts baked into their search of Android, and it's soon to be in Chrome browsers as well.
That was my next question.
And Google has, because it's Google, a whole new way of doing things, which makes perfect sense to people like me who worked with Google since Google came out of business or came into business. So yeah, make sure that your show is submitted properly everywhere was step 3. And then the fourth step, launch. And that doesn't mean, well, it might mean something as simple as, here's our blog post to announce we've got a podcast. But what it should mean is, how are you going to let your existing network of connections know you've got a show? How will you engage with a PR firm, even if it's just writing a press release and pushing it out there? How will you make the world know that you have this show so you can maximize the most attention you're going to get, which is just when you start?
That's fantastic. Well done. So it's almost like you've had this question asked to you before. You talked about Google now indexing.
Mm-hmm.
That's and we all knew it was coming.
Yeah.
But now that it's coming, the other search engines will probably follow suit. But that's huge news for someone in your field. Where it's like, listen, it's not. It's sort of in my opinion.
Yeah.
It used to be content is king. I'm like, listen, it's king, but it has to be good content, right?
Right.
But now it's sort of it blends the I guess the middle between pure content and then searchability.
Well,
so
discoverability. It has to be discovered, and that's a big challenge. How do people actually find shows? We've talked about the discoverability problem in podcasting, whether that's a real or imaginary thing. The reality is that if you look at the usage right now, it's about 5 to 1. So, or five times the number of people listen to podcasts on an iPhone than do on an Android. Okay, 5 times more people listen on an iPhone than on an Android. Do you know what the ratio of number of Android phones to iPhones are? That's 5 to 1.
On the other, in
it's
favor of
backwards.
It's backwards.
It's totally backwards. And that is because Apple has had a native podcast app since 2006, and Google doesn't. And Google will never.
Really?
No. What Google has decided to do instead, Google's not in the app business. Google is going to just bake that into their search platform.
Oh, okay.
And also their smart search. So for the Google at Home product, or is it the Apple at Home? What's the Google product? Google Home. Google Home. Yeah.
Home.
So it's baked into that. It's baked into their big play for voice that they are doing, since podcasts are also typically voice, taking the video aspect out. That's where it's going to work. We hope, we don't know yet, because it's kind of been a quiet release, but the hope, and this hope was stated by Google, is they want to double the amount of podcast consumption by the end of this year.
So that's awesome stuff. Let me ask you this. 2 other questions I have, and I want these guys to jump in too, but one of them sort of non-sequitur, but I mean it's related, but not quite to what you just said. Has a client ever come to you and said, I want a podcast, but they didn't really want a podcast. They just want to have an audio blog?
Luckily, I haven't had a client do that, but I've had plenty of friends that have wanted to do that as well. And that's okay. If that's really what you want to do, then that's fine. But just understand that it's a different kind of a consumption pattern, because podcasts can subscribe and you can get it all the time, where an audio blog is just you rambling in a blog. But I think it's a great gateway drug.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm involved with I was a travel blogger, if you will, by accident, because I was traveling the world and writing a blog. I wasn't really trying to be a travel blogger, but nonetheless I became one. And that was the advice I gave to most of the people who said, I'm a travel blogger and I want a podcast, was simply this: narrate your blog posts. Just go get a microphone,
start with that.
Narrate what you have written down, and see if you, A, like the sound of your voice, B, are willing to do the work necessary, because writing is one thing and speaking aloud is a very different thing. Does it actually work for you? Because start as an audio blog. Fine. Do that. That's what your brand is. Make an audio component with it.
Sure.
Because that'll fit licensing and podcasting as well.
But if you're going to commit to a podcast, if you're going to commit to the resources involved in producing something, and you have several decent audio files to share in a month, then why not turn it into a podcast?
Yeah,
right?
and typically that just happens by default.
Gotcha.
They don't really think about themselves as podcasting because they're first and foremost a blogger. But I think also, Scott, to dig deeper in the question, now with Alexa coming out, I can stay probably with a fairly high degree of certainty here that no one listens to the Joe Rogan podcast on an Alexa. Right? Not until Alexa gets in your car that can drive with you for 3 hours. Alexa audio files, are very short. I need quick bits of content because, Alexa, play my flash briefing. Now, someone right now is listening. Alexa's going off in their background. I love that.
Hey Siri.
That happens to me all the time. I leave my radio on at my house, and I have Alexa, and the radio station that I leave on has an app. It's an iHeartRadio station, and they have an Alexa skill, and iHeartRadio is really pushing that Alexa skill.
Sure.
So they have commercials on all their radio stations of them talking to Alexa. And I keep coming home, and my radio's playing, and Alexa's playing the radio, and it took me like 3 different times of it happening for me to figure out what the hell was happening.
Yeah. But with Alexa, it's a new distribution medium. Right now, we're pushing the same content through there as we are for our regular podcast, but I am of the opinion that if you want to make better content for Alexa, and you're making long-form content right now, you should break that content up into a series of little segments, atomize your content, as I like to call it, and make those available to Alexa in a different manner. The rules are changing all the time for this game.
That's the atomized comment. I remember reading something about like that in like 2010, right? The whole the atomization of, we talked about this before, about the whole atomize your content and share it in all the new mediums that are available. But just because you have new medium doesn't mean it's one size fits all.
Yeah.
So you have to be nuanced in it. So let me just kind of jump forward a little bit. So if I'm a company and I'm listening to this podcast today, how do I get in touch with you? Like, what's the name of your company? How do I reach you?
So, Simpler Media Productions is me. It's one company under an umbrella company I've got, which doesn't matter. But if you really want to find out more about what I actually do and how complicated all of this stuff is, I have a very simple, easy website, podcastlaunch.pro.
Okay.
Because that's what I do, really. At the end of the day, I help people launch and then maintain their podcast. So, podcastlaunch.pro, you'll see just about every service that I offer, and I've got a nice little chart on the bottom that says who's responsible for what. If somebody wants to work with me, who's doing this and who's doing the other. And I've got 3 different service offerings that I provide to make it a nice and easy checkbox so they can go through and say that, yep, oh no, I need someone to do all these things, which means it's going to cost. Yeah. Make it easy.
I have more questions to ask him, but do you guys want to jump in?
We can ask more questions. I just think that I think the name of this episode is going to be Podcasting 101. And we're going to make it mandatory.
Sure.
For the studio, because we're trying to promote this Studio 85 as a pay it forward, have people try this space like we are.
Yeah.
Fumble your way through it. But this is a great, hey, you must listen to this podcast before
and I think
do anything.
Yeah. And this studio is
this
really
is a great first podcast in the studio.
Sure, absolutely.
And it's set up fantastic. These are excellent microphones that you have. Great. Most people produce broadcasts on a lot cheaper setups than this. So nice shock mounts, 4 different microphones all going in, multi-channel mixer. It's all right here. So yeah, it's nicely set up.
We also are going to have a full
what
bar
do you
pretty
think
soon.
Of something like, is it Anchor?
Yeah, Anchor, sure.
Yeah, that I downloaded just recently to see it.
I have an Anchor account.
Yeah, so talk to me about that Anchor as we're giving one-on-one tips, because that's a app.
So what is Anchor for those of us that don't know?
Yeah, so Anchor is let me explain it this way. So Anchor is to podcasting what Snapchat is to YouTube. So it is a way to produce audio content on your phone, completely on your phone, mixing in sounds and voices and little bitty short clips that I think you can only record I think they just recently changed it. It was only about 2 minutes was the most you could record on Anchor. Now they'll let you do it more. But it's complete experience inside your phone. There's no need to go anywhere else to create and share and even have people call in who are also Anchor users. But it's limited to Anchor. right now. There is a way to get your feed out of Anchor and produce and distribute that on Apple Podcasts and other channels, but it's quasi-podcasting. I love what Anchor's doing because they're also redefining the space. Will I think that everybody's going to switch to Anchor? No, but I do think that Anchor is a great gateway drug for people who are intimidated by having to buy mixers and microphones and get an engineer, and they just want to do it on their phone. Great. There is a certain audience out there who can make really, really great, compelling videos on Snapchat that going to YouTube is too much for them, and certainly going to the movies is too much for them to do. But why not? You can have a phone app that lets you produce audio content. It's a great way to get started.
Does that app let you edit some of the things?
Yeah, but it's very limited in what you can do for editing. Right?
You can. I can see it. I love the example of it being a gateway. You can just dabble with it without getting overwhelmed with all the other stuff.
Yeah.
You can hear your own voice which is my other question I was going to ask. Did you like your voice when you first heard it?
Well, I've been talking to myself since I was a small child.
Love my voice. Who's that? How you doing?
I'm one of those people who has said, yes, someone put a pair of headphones on that kid and get him a microphone because he's destined to talk into the radio.
Yeah.
But everybody hates their own voice when they first hear it. I mean, I remember listening to my voice the first time on a cassette recorder. I'm thinking, there's something wrong with this. It's not recording properly, right? You have to learn that one. But, it's to the point now, because I've been doing this with headphones on professionally since 2002, it's very difficult for me to do a radio interview or a podcast interview without having my headphones on.
Really?
If I don't have studio cans on, I'm just not doing it right.
Sometimes I wear headphones around the house that aren't plugged in. I can tell my wife that I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
That's the greatest. Me of the movie Over the Top. Like when he turns the hat, that's like he puts the headphones on and he goes into podcast mode.
You do. I don't know that movie.
You don't. You do. You know Over the Top.
I don't know it either.
Don't joke like that.
I don't know it either.
I forgot. Yeah, it was. That was
remember,
his,
he turns that
was
around.
Why? I mean, so you're in Arizona now. Like, what? Were you from here originally?
Yeah, we spent 17 years here.
Where are you from?
Born and raised in Oklahoma, but we got the hell out of there as quickly as possible. So some time in Dallas, some time in L.A., and Phoenix since 1997.
So and you got married in Phoenix-ish? Or?
Oh, no, my wife and I have been married for 2 days ago was our anniversary. We've been married for 29 years now. So, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So she Oklahoma, she Okie as well?
She was as well, yeah.
Okay, so you guys spent some time in Phoenix for a bunch?
Spent some time in Phoenix for 17 years, raised our son here and then left. We went to go travel the world, a self-funded sabbatical for all of 2015, which was every bit as awesome and expensive as that sounds.
Self-funded. And that was you writing.
Yeah. So, and as we got to the end of our year, our bank account was dwindling, which was the plan all along. But we realized we didn't want to go back home. So we thought, we'll just stay going abroad for a while, but we do need to make some money.
Right.
So let's go to Bangkok. That seemed like an easy place. My wife holds a master's degree in curriculum design and she's taught school for I don't know how many years, 20 some odd years. So the international school scooped her up. She was the assistant principal at a private school in Thailand.
Okay.
So she was doing that, which afforded me the ability to not have to go to work every single day, not trying to get a job. So that's when I really got serious about the podcast production company.
Wi-Fi speed where you were great? Broadband speed?
Good enough.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it great, but yeah.
What was your setup back there? What kind of equipment did you have?
So the great news is because I mostly did behind-the-scenes production, I can do everything on a laptop. I mean, I have microphones that my wife and I use to produce our show. Portable, easy.
Do you guys wear them when you're having dinner, just hanging out, just because you're more comfortable that way?
Usually when we're drinking beer. More than one podcast recorded at a local brewery in Thailand. A lot of that.
That's awesome.
But that was the plan, just to do to stay living abroad, not necessarily in Thailand, but somewhere else.
Sure.
But then we got a call from our son who told me that he forgot that conversation we had when he was 12, and I'm going to be a grandparent.
Yankees.
In a few months now. Okay. So my wife and I didn't want to be. Thank you. We didn't want to be grandparents abroad. We didn't want to do that.
FaceTime wasn't enough. Okay.
So
I'm with you.
We moved back.
Thanks for sharing. I mean, that's not that's light, but that's fun. I mean, plus you got a chance to wear some nice sandals today too.
I wear these sandals for everywhere that I go. Man. I hate putting shoes on. In Thailand,
those are the better over his shorts. Just so you know,
that's true.
You take your shoes off everywhere you go in Thailand. So don't wear shoes you have to tie. It's crazy.
No, that's awesome. If I had better looking feet, I'd do the same thing, but I don't. I got nails are nasty.
Should we wrap this up?
Yeah, absolutely. But I just thanks very much for coming today.
Thank you, guys.
Clearly, you have a wealth of knowledge that we're only just starting to pick the surface, but I could see if you're keen, I can see you coming back here time and again just for us to kind of keep picking your brain. Yes.
Well, one requirement is get that bar stocked.
No, that's the big thing. And if it were stocked with something of your liking, what would it be?
I'm a craft beer nerd and also a Scotch drinker.
You're a Scotch guy. Okay,
Scotch.
good to know.
Good to know.
It's very oaky and woody. You would think it's Scotch, right? But then I see all this, I'm thinking, no, it's got to be the good tequila. So we gotta.
I don't mind quality tequila.
Whiskey,
variety.
Scotch, tequila, vodka.
One of the things we're going
don't
to be doing is
discriminate.
there's some small batch vodka, tequila, Scotch makers here. We're gonna.
Yeah, I know.
We're actually going to bring them onto the show and we're going to sample.
Of course we will.
And we're going to Uber home.
Yeah,
so it's going to be good.
Yeah, just get cots.
Or rickshaw. With those, did you have your own fair share of rickshaw rides, by the way?
Rickshaws, tuk-tuks, horror stories. Yeah. I'll tell you a brief one.
Let's end with a good horror story.
I was actually recording a podcast in the back of a tuk-tuk when the tuk-tuk got into an accident with another tuk-tuk. Yes, it's all caught on tape. Amazing.
Can you, do you have the audio recording as it happened?
Yeah, it's. I was the co-host of the Bangkok podcast.
Do you have it yourself? Can you
probably
share?
on my
can you
phone.
share a bit of that? We'll put it on this. Right, that's hilarious. The actual accident itself. What the? Hello. Well, thanks again for listening. And Guy, you want to say bye to your people?
Bye-bye.
Joe, anyone? We'll figure out how to edit it afterwards.
Yeah, one of the things I work with my clients on is giving them a good outro so that they actually
come
out of the show on a regular
I'm putting you on the
basis.
spot. Give us an outro right now.
Thanks again for listening to the Creative Spaces Live podcast from Studio 85 in Peoria, Arizona. My name is Evo Terra. I am here with Guy and Scott and Joe.
This guy's a pro. Well done.
Right?
Well done.
Right?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And cut.
Thank you for listening to Creative Spaces Podcast. For more information about Highway 85 Creative, visit us at highway85creative.com.